Within the vastness of this great universe, a fierce battle was fought. Resulting in the disappearance of a planet. This prompted various evolving life forms, which have been under long hibernation, to emerge one after another. They began their quest to overtake the universe. The Amnelia Royal Cosmic Force challenged these unknown intruders, but unfortunately suffered a miserable defeat. However, they did manage to complete a unique and sophisticated fighter craft using the forbidden enemy power and technology. They named it Silverhawk. Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have G-Darius, Taito's 1997 Shoot 'em Up classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. G-Darius originally released in arcade in 1997. It received a PlayStation port in 1998. Then a lot of the features that were added to the PlayStation port were incorporated back into an arcade release and released as a version 2 in 1999. This is the 6th game in the Darius series, but canonically it falls before the very first Darius game, making it the first game in the Darius timeline, if you could really follow along with that. It's also the first 3D entry in the Darius series, going for 3D polygonal enemies and backgrounds rather than more traditional hand-drawn sprites and backgrounds. So, what do we have here? Well, the base is obviously a horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up with a heavy side of fish. Like previous Darius titles, the enemies in the game are largely aquatic-based life forms turned into mecha enemies. We're flying the iconic Silverhawk ship, and along with that we have the usual power-up system that goes with it. So there are many enemies that will appear in different colors: red, blue, green, purple. And if we destroy those enemies, they'll leave behind orbs. These are our power-ups. So the red powers up our main cannon, which starts out as missiles. Then if we fill up the meter in the top left and get another power-up, we'll be able to upgrade it to lasers and then later wave. We also have the bombs, which we can upgrade to the twin bomb, then the multi-bomb. And lastly, the blue is our shield. If we collect the shields, we'll be able to take multiple hits. The original shield has 3, then you can upgrade that to Super Shield, which can take 4 hits, and ultimately Ultra Shield that can take 5 hits. And that's the blue power-up. We also have a new spice introduced in Darius, or G-Darius, and that's the Capture Ball. So the Capture Ball allows us to capture enemies by firing this, Capture Ball on it. Not too dissimilar from something like Pokemon. Once we have captured the enemy, they'll behave like an option. It's kind of similar to Gradius, but each enemy that you can capture has a different behavior. So some will act as like shields, others will position themselves behind you or follow you and shoot at the enemies, and yet others will dive at the enemies, dealing heavy damage with themselves in kind of a battering ram style. We also have a couple other things we can do with them. We can take the enemies that we've captured and detonate them in an explosion. Or we can absorb those enemies and use them to launch a beam attack at the enemy. Like so. The beam attack is really powerful and is used in a mechanic that's new and unique to G-Darius, and that's the beam dueling. So we didn't get to see it there because the first boss, Eclipse Eye, is relatively weak compared to all the others. So, as is standard with Darius titles, after you've cleared a stage, you get to pick which stage you want. So here we can go to Stage Beta or Stage Gamma. We'll take Stage Gamma, as it can show off one of the cooler stages, I feel. So, before I get too far into it, let me note that I'm playing the PlayStation 2 version of G-Darius. So, G-Darius is available on the PlayStation 2 as part of the Taito Legend 2 compilation. It's a port of the original arcade, not the version 2 arcade. So it doesn't have some of the extra features that were added to that version that are also on the original PlayStation disc. The PlayStation version is available digitally on the Japanese PSN, playable on at least the PlayStation 3, and I believe possibly even the PSP and the Vita, but I'm not certain on that. So the game itself has 15 stages in it, and there are 5 total endings. And in those 15 stages, there are 2 possible areas you can choose between. So in this particular stage, we will ultimately choose between Area E and Area F, and it just changes your path to your boss, and also it'll change which version of the boss you fight. So the boss will be unique, and there'll be certain strengths and weaknesses. I want to try and capture this mid-boss. Got him. And here we find ourselves about to get an awesome entrance from the boss of this stage. So we've met up with some other of our fleets. These aren't Silverhawks behind us. They're a similar design ship, but they're not as powerful, as well as a cap ship, which gets utterly decimated by the huge battleship that is approaching fast, Queen Fossil. And here we can choose Area E or F. So on this stage, Area E will take us above Queen Fossil, whereas Area E takes us above Queen Fossil, where Area F will take us below her. That really changes up the way that the fight itself goes, so you want to be careful with choosing which path you want to take. Some are obviously going to be easier than others. So having this stage as captain, which are what these larger, we'll call them sub-bosses or mini-boss enemies that we can capture are, is really helpful in this kind of a fight. As is typical with previous Darius games, they'll also have some homing lasers. We'll see some examples of that, where these ones will home in on us, come out straight, and then make all these 90-degree turns to try and destroy us. Really, really frustrating. So anyway, that's basically what we have in G-Darius. I haven't shown off the beam dueling just yet, but we're almost to a point where we can do so. So I did go and blow up that captain so we can capture this one, so we have a fresh captain to use. So, minus flavors. Queen Fossil here is a great example of this. The bosses in this game are tanky as can be, and some of them are just like frustratingly so, where it feels like you're fighting them for freaking ever. And then there's the power-ups. So I mentioned that we could go and upgrade our shot from the missiles to the laser and so on and so forth, and our shield, but the problem with that, before we get to talking about the problem with that, let's see if we can't actually do some successful beam dueling here. So for beam dueling, you have to have a captured enemy, and then you'll turn them into a beam. And then we're going to counter the boss's shot, and it's basically absorbing it, getting more and more powerful, to the point where it'll eventually take up like half the screen. It's really, really epic. We didn't show it off too well there, but you kind of get the idea. But with the power-ups, if you happen to die while you haven't fully upgraded a weapon, so right now our missile, we've got the whole bar filled, but if we die before we collect another main power-up, so a red power-up, our bar will be completely reset and we won't be able to get to the laser. If we get the laser, then we'll continue with the laser, but sometimes that's easier said than done. And it can be frustrating to be so close to upgrading a weapon and yet in the end not get it. In this case, we did get our laser upgrade, but a lot of times that doesn't happen, especially with some of the power-ups that drop more infrequently, like the shield. And that's not just a problem with this particular title, that's a problem that all Darius have. And then, this one's less of a complaint than just a minor observation. That compared to previous Darius games, specifically Gaiden, this one's not as colorful as that, largely stemming to adopting polygons and not having as much in terms of design that way. Plus flavors though, I love the capture ball system that this game has. The ability to capture enemies, and with so many unique abilities to use, you can like blow up those enemies in a small nuke, or you can turn them into this massive beam to deal damage and duel the bosses. That's really, really cool. Then, as drab as sometimes the colors are, I love the 3D enemies and the 3D environments that we have here. They look really awesome and just set the stage for some of the titles that would come after G-Darius, such as the Darius Burst franchise. And then lastly, the complaining about them being tanky is one thing, but I love the bosses in the Darius franchise. The whole warning, huge battleship approaching fast is iconic and awesome, and just how unique every boss fight is, and just how unique the bosses themselves look, is always a huge treat. So, if you haven't checked out G-Darius, and you happen to be a fan of the Darius franchise, or just a fan of horizontal scrolling shoot-em-ups in general, I would highly recommend checking this one, and really almost every other title in the Darius franchise out. There are a couple that aren't very good, but for the most part, most of them are really solid shoot-em-ups that are worth playing. Truly savory dishes that will leave you filled every time. Because there's just so much there, so much replayability, so much unique value. It's really one of the premier shoot-em-up franchises, and it's really makes me happy that it's still one that's going on even to this day. Alright, that'll wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Warning, a huge battleship, Absolute Defender, is approaching fast. I hate Absolute Defender.